I want to first thank all of you for taking part in this program. This is, I think, the fourth one that Gilchrist has done, but it all started as a result of a piece of legislation that I introduced 8 years ago, which designated March 30th Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans Day. It just happened at the time I was the only combat veteran in the Senate of Maryland, and it just happened that I was a Vietnam combat veteran, and so it just seemed the appropriate thing to do, and it's really morphed into something that's been really good. So let me start with my script here. Veterans of the Vietnam War, families, friends, and distinguished guests that are here with us at Martin's West, and for all who are watching, because this event is being live streamed across the country, I'd like to welcome you to Gilchrist's fourth annual Welcome Home Vietnam Day celebration. I'm John Astle, and I'm privileged and honored to be your host for this afternoon's program. I'm a retired Marine Corps colonel. I did 10 years active, and I did 20 in the reserves and retired on 30. I was a combat helicopter pilot in Vietnam from June of 1968 until July of 1969. And I was among the 100,000 or so pilots and crew members who served with all of us in daily operations for our warfighting successes. We were involved in every aspect of the war, serving the troops from medevac, giving them ammunition resupplies, aerial fighting, the pilots. We had many different roles. Our medevac pilots were often called the angels of the sky. It just happened in my club in the Marine Corps. We didn't have dedicated medevac. All of us, when a medevac came up, you'd get a call on the radio, go get it. So all of us involved ourselves in that. And that was one of the more satisfying roles that we played in the war. We took care of the wounded. We got them back to the care that they needed. The Air Cav guys, I know we've got some Air Cav guys here in the room today, they flew the Hueys like they were horses and riding into battle. That's that cavalry thing. And the guy that I was going to be the master of ceremonies had an accident, and his health does not permit him to be here, but he's a cavalry guy, and he wears that black cavalry hat and those spurs when he shows up. Whatever. And finally, the gunship pilots, who were heavily armed with guns, rockets, and they provided the aerial firepower to everything that would keep the enemy off of view. From me and my fellow helicopter pilots, it was a great honor to serve you. The men and women who faced the enemy every day on the ground, day in and day out, you were and still are our heroes. Well, we begin this program this morning, as all such gatherings like this begin. I now call upon the Vietnam Veterans of America, Baltimore Chapter 965, under the command of Dean Henderson, to present the colors. If you're able, we'd like you to rise, and please stand and remain standing for the national anthem.
Underguard, halt. Left face. First end, arms.
I now call upon Vietnam veteran and Vet Center Director Wayne Miller to sing the national anthem. Thank you, Sergeant Miller, for that rendition of the national anthem. And now, together, let us recite the Pledge of Allegiance, which affirms the values and the freedoms that the flag represents. I pledge allegiance to the Union of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And color guard, if you could retire the colors, please.
Order, arm. Right face. Forward march by the half step.
I now call upon Vietnam veteran and Gilchrist veteran volunteer Tim Price to lead us in an invocation. I'll get out of your way.
Please be seated. So it's quite a privilege to be able to speak to all of you in a brief fashion. I want to emphasize that. So we're not going to be doing church, so there's no 35-minute sermon, so relax. What I thought I would do, rather than give my own personal prayer, is just to read a few scriptures to you that hopefully will have meaning to you and bless you with the Word of God. So those of you that are familiar with the Bible, Psalms, the book of Psalms was written by a warrior, King David. And so I think he has some good advice for us, as many of the warriors here, what you have gone through, what you've experienced in your life, whether it's you personally or a family member. And I've talked to a few people who have lost sons in Iraq and Afghanistan. Psalm 137 reads, "He heals the brokenhearted, and he binds up their wounds. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and he saves those who are crushed in spirit." And lastly, Psalm 56. "You have kept count of my tossings. You have put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your book? This I know. God is for me. May the words of the scripture bless you. And may they bless also, as many of you are familiar with, what's going on in Ukraine. So may we take a moment of silence and ask for their safety and an increase in their spirit. Amen. What I'd like you to do in closing is, if you can stand up, please stand up. And I'm hoping that you are familiar with the person next to you, because the next thing might be a little difficult for some of you, but you can grab a hand, touch an elbow, put a hand on a shoulder, and please receive this blessing from God. As Diane and I were talking, we agreed in one thing, that we are all conduits for the blessings that God has for people. So please receive this blessing that is available to you even now. Okay. May the love of God, the Father, and the grace and mercy of Jesus, and the peace and the comfort of his Spirit be upon you for this day and all the days to come. Amen. Thank you. You may be seated.
Distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, today we gather to honor the men and women who served during the Vietnam War. 49 years ago, the remaining U.S. combat troops left Vietnam from a war that spanned almost 20 years. We're here today on behalf of a grateful nation and a grateful community to thank all of the veterans who served during the Vietnam War and give you a joyous welcome home. As I look around the grand ballroom here, I'm touched by seeing many generations of servicemen and women, and even our future military, like 10-year-old PFC Somerville and 13-year-old Corporal Parker White of the Young Marines are in the back of the room. So I would ask you two gentlemen to stand so we can recognize you. And I'd like to personally thank you. You're the future of my Marine Corps. That's what we always say. It's my Marine Corps. It could be yours. As a Vietnam veteran, I'm humbled and grateful that you all are here today to honor your fellow servicemen. Some of you came before us and helped pave the way, and many of you came after, carrying on the tradition of defending freedom. And some of you are prepared to serve our country when you graduate or you come of age, and for that we thank you. This is an opportunity to salute each of you from every branch of your service to your service to our great country. And freedom was defined by our Constitution more than 200 years ago and defended by all of us. You know, we take that oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that's been going on for an awful long time. But together, we make up what I think are the finest military forces the world has ever known. So, now there's special guests in our audience today, and I think it's important that we take a moment to recognize them. From Maryland Veterans Department, we have the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Secretary Owens. And I'm proud to say the Secretary's another Marine. We're everywhere. We have his Deputy Secretary, Bob Finn. Bob. That's what we call jointness in the military. And we also have the Deputy Director of Outreach and Advocacy, Denise Noe. I think, is Denise here? She's not here. We also have in the audience Major General Peter Aylward, United States Army retired, who's the Director of the Department of Defense Vietnam War Commemoration. And thank you for being here, General. We appreciate you. We also have an Army veteran from Harford County, the Councilman Andre Johnson. Where's Andre? You got a round of applause. So, again, I just have to say we're grateful that all of you could join us for this afternoon. We could not have put this grand celebration on without the generosity and support of our biggest sponsors. You know, anytime you have something, you got to have people supporting it, and so that's important that we recognize them. Our premier sponsor is the Friendly Inn Association of Baltimore, which was founded in 1985 with a mission to help the homeless and hungry in Baltimore City. Many of the people who the Friendly Inn serves are veterans. John Butch West is president of the board and served in the Army as a second lieutenant in Vietnam from 1966 to 1967. So we thank you, Butch, and the Friendly Inn for your support of this event. And these sponsors are always tiered, so the fifth five-star sponsors are the Inner Circle Solutions of the Michael and the Michael Stanley Foundation. We're privileged to have Ken Stanley here today with us of the Michael Stanley Foundation in memory of his son, Michael, and his nephew, Matt Payne, who's a veteran of the U.S. Air Force Special Forces and founder of the Inner Circle Solutions, a consulting firm specializing in security and crisis management. They're both here with us today to honor Second Lieutenant Herman Chuck Payne, who was killed in action on April 26, 1967. He posthumously received a Silver Star for his gallantry on that day. And Second Lieutenant's only son will speak to us this afternoon as a grateful son. So, Matt, please.
Okay, I'll try to get through this. So my dad was born western part of North Carolina, back in the middle of the sticks. It was a tobacco farming family. Enlisted in the Army in 1957 at the age of 16. Worked his way up through the ranks, went to Ranger School, went to jump school. Ultimately went to Vietnam in November of '66. I was born in February, and he was killed in April. So he's laid to rest at the Andrew Johnson Memorial Cemetery in Greenville, North Carolina, which was halfway between my mom and his family there in North Carolina. Later on in life, I enlisted in the Air Force. I was a combat controller. Did my time from 85 to 95, ended at the Joint Special Operations Command. And now Buffy and myself own Inner Circle Solutions. We also have a 501c3 nonprofit called Outer Circle, where we help our veterans in need. We do a lot of work with PTSD, with anxiety, and with helping our military veterans transition from the military into the private world in whatever capacity that means. So we will continue to carry on, and we'll make sure that what happened to you guys does not happen to our future warfighters. So you'll hear from Donovan here in a couple minutes, so thank you.
Matt, thank you very much. I think we all understand how difficult some of these memories are. And we appreciate you sharing your reflections as a grateful son. Matt and Ken are deeply sorry for your loss and grateful that you're with us here today. We could remember and honor your dad and brother-in-law, Lieutenant Herman Chuck Payne, for his services and sacrifice. And I can only imagine how proud your dad would be of you if he were here today. Lacey Kidwell, one of Gilchrist's music therapists, will be playing the United States Armed Forces medley. That's a song for each of us. And And then Sherman Knapp is on percussion. I used to be a drummer in the high school band, so I know something about that. But they didn't want me to demonstrate how long ago it was. We also are privileged to have a Vietnam veteran and active military personnel stand together for their respective branches, and we invite you, if you're able, to stand for yours. So, with that, please.
We're always ready for the call. We place our trust in Thee. Through surf and storm and howling gale, high shall our purpose be. Semper Paratus is our guide, our flame, our glory too. To fight, to save, or fight and die, I Coast Guard, we are for you. Into the blue we will fly, reaching beyond the sky, soaring above the cloudy dome, fighting for our precious home, bravely charging ahead, where angels fear to tread, charting a better, higher course, where the U.S. Space Force. Off we go into the wild blue yonder, climbing high into the sun. Here we come, zooming to meet our thunder. Atom boys, give 'em their gun. Down we dive, spouting our flame from under. Off with one, a hell of a roar. We live in fame or go down in flame. Nothing can stop the U.S. Air Force. Anchors away, my boys, anchors away. Farewell to foreign shores, we sail at break of day. Through our last night on shore, drink to the foam, until we meet once more. Here's wishing you a happy voyage home. From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, first to fight our country's battles in the air, on land and sea. First to fight for right and freedom, and to keep our honor clean. We are proud to claim the title of United States Marine. First to fight for the right and to build the nation's might, and the army goes rolling along. Proud of all we have done, fighting till the battle's won, and the army goes rolling along. Then it's high, high, hey, the army's on its way. Count off the cadence loud and strong, for where'er we go, we will always know that the army goes rolling along.
Thank you. Now, we've got a new twist that we're going to try this year. So I'm going to ask in the audience, we're trying to find the oldest living Vietnam veteran. And so we're going to start at 75. Anybody that is 75 or older, hold up your hand. Okay, well, there are too many. So how about anybody that's over 80? There's still too many. How about 85? We're getting closer. How about 86? Okay, I see 2. 87. Oh, okay. Hold your hands up again, please, and let's find out what month. We're dicing this down pretty closely. What month? And I think January wins. So if you would approach the stand, we've got a presentation for you, please. Yeah, please. We're not bringing it to you. You got to come here.
Just because you're 86 don't mean you can't.
You got a ramp here. Yeah.
You make it up the ramp?
So are you going to do this presentation, or am I going to do this? This is for the oldest veteran.
You giving them all this?
Yeah, that's what Diane said.
Well, I'll hand it to you.
Okay. Well, congratulations. And he's setting the example that we're all going to aspire to. So we have these things for you. First of all, you already have a Vietnam veteran's hat, but this is your extra in case you put it
I've
in
got
your.
a friend I can give it to.
Yeah, put it in your closet. And now this is a blanket that was knit especially for Vietnam veterans, and you can put this on your couch, maybe even on your bed, depending.
I'll do that.
And the last thing is a shadow box that you can put your medals and memorabilia in. And all of us have seen these. And so,
Thank you very much.
thank you. And what's your name?
John Ross, R-O-S-S,
This is John Rosso. And what service?
Air Force.
He was in the Air Force.
I'm sorry, Air Force. I'm sorry, it's Air Force.
It's okay. My brother was in the Air Force. I've dealt with that all my life. Almost 7 years ago, I sponsored Senate Bill 80, which was passed unanimously by both the Senate and the House. And it was kind of interesting. When I got the bill drafted and I was ready to introduce it, the word got out, and every single member of the Senate of Maryland wanted to be a co-sponsor. So, you know, we got that done, and of course, the bill was passed by unanimous vote of the Senate. And then the House found out that there was a Senate bill, and they wanted a House bill. So the same bill was drafted for the House, and every single member of the 141 members of the House signed on as co-sponsors. The day the bill was voted, the two bills were voted, Governor Hogan, who was just beginning his term as governor, he's now in his 8th year, but he decided he would sign that bill the day it was voted. Normally, bills aren't signed until June. They have a big day, and everybody comes in to see their bill signed. But we had ours signed on that day, and from the governor's room, we went to a local ballroom, and we held our first Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans celebration. And it's gone on for a long time, and it's become what we have today. And I think it was important to me and for my fellow Vietnam veterans to have this day, because for a long time we dealt with our memories, some of these memories still live in the back of your mind. We dealt with our memories, with our scars, both physical and emotional, but we did it alone or in small groups of friends who had shared the same experience. But for the country as a whole, we were forgotten. And I think that's what makes this law and this recognition day so special, because all of us are being recognized for what we were asked to do for our country. The monumental day for all of us, this is a monumental day for all of us who served during the Vietnam War, and ensures that at least one day every year, grateful communities across Maryland will honor and welcome us home, some of us for the very first time. Also, it's the one day every year that we can come together to remember, honor, and grieve for those that we've lost. And for many of us, we continue to carry those memories on our shoulders and in our hearts. So I was particularly touched when Matt was trying to talk about his father, because I was asked to tell you a story, and this is a very difficult one for me. This was in October of 1968, and the Marine Corps in I Corps, which was the northernmost part of the country, was going to do a big operation. Somebody had decided this was a good thing to do, so we had every helicopter that was available in I Corps, every Marine Corps helicopter that was available, and we had several thousand Marines, and we were going to put them into a circle about 15 miles in circumference. Well, I had breakfast that morning with a friend of mine, a guy that I'd gone to flight school with, a guy named Bing Emerson. Bing was a Harvard graduate, had a bright future ahead, and we'd become friends in flight school. We were in Vietnam at the same time, but he was in a different squadron, so I didn't see him that often. But that morning, everybody had come to where we were going to kick off this big operation, and he and I had breakfast together. Subsequently, we went to our own squadrons, and we briefed, and we got in our airplanes, and we flew off. Well, the section that my squadron had been given was covered by a low layer, we called it a scud layer, clouds, kind of like a fog. And we had 12 airplanes in my squadron. So we get over the landing area, and the first 4 break off, and they start to spiral down. And the second 4 break off, and they start to spiral down. And the last 4. Now, I'm number 12. Now, they tell you from the very first day you go to flight school, you don't fly into clouds unless you're on an instrument flight plan, because you don't know what's inside those clouds. And we didn't know how close to the ground the bottom of these clouds were. So you can imagine it was an adrenaline-producing experience. I came out of the bottom. I was doing 130 knots or so in a circle, and I saw the first 3 airplanes in my division that were circling around. We had about 300 feet of clearance between the bottom of the clouds and the ground. In the middle of our circle were the last 2 helicopters of the division in front of us, and they were going in the opposite direction. And we were going in hot because it was an unsecured zone. That meant that everybody was shooting their .50 caliber machine guns. They were blazing all over, and I was yelling at my crew, cease fire, because the last thing I wanted to do was to have one of my guys shoot down one of my squadron mates. Well, we got on the ground, we dropped our people, and we took off to go back to get another load. At about that time, things just kind of broke loose. Now, on the stick, on the 46, there's a little trigger, and you squeeze it when you want to talk on the intercom, and you squeeze it all the way if you want to talk on the radio. And all of a sudden, the radio's just lit up with guys screaming, I'm hit, and so a lot of, and so we knew there were some pretty scared guys squeezing that trigger like it was going to make a difference. Anyway, we went back, we got another load, and we finished putting all the troops in. In the meantime, we were trying to get in to where those 2 helicopters had landed and had landed on a command detonated mine. Bing was one of them. His airplane was destroyed, and many of his passengers were killed and otherwise injured. So we couldn't get in because the enemy fire was just too intense. And so in the meantime, the other squadrons all went home to their respective airfields where they were stationed. In the meantime, while we're waiting, my squadron commander comes to me and says, we got a reconnaissance team that's in extremis and they need an emergency extraction. Well, you can imagine that sends a rush of adrenaline through your system, and I don't mind telling you, I was pretty scared. When I got out to where they were and I called them on the radio and I said, well, we're here, and they said, well, good, but we can't, we're not ready, we're in hand-to-hand combat. That's great. So I flew off a mile or two and circled while they called in airstrikes, and they had UE gunships working, and when they finally got ready, they called me on the radio and said, you can come get us. So I took a deep breath and started down. Now, with the gunships and the cover we had, we got in, we got them, and we went back to the fire base where they were stationed. In the meantime, somebody had gotten in and gotten the casualties out of the 2 helicopters that were destroyed at the very beginning of the operation. One of them was piloted by my friend Bing, the guy that I'd had breakfast with that morning. The bodies were in body bags and they were lined up along the runway. And so my wingman and I were the last 2 helicopters out, and we were told that we were going to take the bodies back to the morgue. Well, Bing's body was on my airplane. I don't mind telling you, I cried all the way back to the morgue. And that was probably, of all the things I experienced while I was over there, the most difficult day that I had. So I understand emotions, Matt, and I've dealt with that now for 53 years. It's back here, and it'll probably never go away. With this opportunity, I'd like to, in addition to remembering Bing Emerson, Second Lieutenant Herman Chuck Payne, along with the other 58,200 members of the U.S. Armed Forces who died or were missing in action, and for all the Vietnam veterans who did come home and are no longer with us. So I ask that you now turn your attention to the table on the front by the stage. That's our table of remembrance, where many of you have provided, and this one too, many of you have provided photos and written names of loved ones, comrades, and friends who served our country well in Vietnam and who may not have made it home from battle, or who returned home but may no longer be with us. So tonight, we're going to light a candle in their memory. And Delegate Tiger Davis, I had the privilege of serving in the legislature with Tiger. He's the son of a Baltimore Vietnam War veteran, a former delegate, the Maryland General Assembly, and commander of the Buffalo Soldiers, Baltimore District. Would you do us a great honor, Tiger, of lighting the candle? Thank you, Delegate Davis. Our grateful community will never forget them, and may we pause to remember all of our deceased brothers and sisters who served in the war. And at this point, we'd like you to, while we just sit in silence, say either silently to yourself or out loud the names of friends, relatives, or people that you lost.
Lieutenant Commander Woods.
So don't let him be the only one. There's others. Bing Emerson.
Lieutenant Tony Watson, Morgan State University.
PFC Gary Canet.
Robert Hazen Shields, Hilo, 6 August 1969.
James Gerald Montgomery, July 29, 1967, Hacienda.
Charles Bondi, February 14th, 1969.
September 7th, 1969. Lieutenant Hal Miller, 1969.
Chuck Bay, 1967.
Vernon Stitch, August 7th, 1967.
Tony Castillo, August 1st, 1969.
Thank you. Well, with that, we're going to move on. And I know those of you that didn't speak, you have those memories in your mind, and you'll continue to honor those people. So here to provide the official welcome from Gilchrist is its president, Kathy Hamill, and a daughter of a World War II Army veteran. I think many of us that went to Vietnam had parents that served in the military. I know in my hometown that was, if you were a male, you were going in the service. That was just a given. My dad was in the Army Air Corps, and he wasn't happy when I came home and told him I was going to be a Marine. So, anyway, we're grateful for Kathy's leadership and her unwavering support and her passion for making We Honor Vietnam Veterans a top priority for Gilchrist. Kathy.
Good afternoon and welcome. It's my privilege to be here today. And while I have not served, Senator Astle shared, my father enlisted in the Army at the age of 16. He had the choice of either going to the coal mines or going to the Army, and his choice was definitive and clear that it would be the Army. He would serve in a communication depot in Greenland. He and we are proud of his service, and he enhanced our lives through his stories and his commitment throughout his life for fighting for freedom for all. My nephew also serves today in the Navy. And you may wonder, why would Gilchrist, as a hospice organization, support the veterans? And I'm here to tell you that we support the veterans for two reasons. One, it is absolutely the right thing to do as a fellow human being. And secondly, we learn every day through our work with dying people how important it is for those who survive to deal with their grief and loss. Unresolved grief leads not only to mental health issues, but physical health issues as well. And so we hope that by making space today, we provide just a little bit of healing for each and every one of you. I would be remiss today if I didn't take a moment to acknowledge how special it is to have this event be our first in-person event since the pandemic began. It was the first event that we canceled, with the pandemic beginning on March 11th of 2000. And it is so fitting that it be our first event to reconvene. It is so wonderful to be here with you and to actually see you. We were fearful that we would be in masks, and it's just so wonderful to see your faces and to be with you in this way. We know that the beginning of the Vietnam War is a date and time that you will never forget. In March of 1965, when President Johnson committed to fighting communism in the north of Vietnam, he sent the first U.S. combat troops to the jungles of the South. This war would be the first televised war, and the use of television brought vivid details for the first time about war to every American home. The war went on for almost 20 years. In March of 1973, the war ended, bringing you and all remaining troops home. Some of you quickly changed out of your uniforms when your plane touched down on American soil, reluctant and hesitant to show that you served. Many of you came home alone, as you did when you first arrived in Vietnam, without the support of your comrades. Some of you were physically assaulted, spit on. Some of you would even be called baby killers. Some of you returned home, many of you, to the deafening sound of silence, as if you never served, as if the war never happened, and most painfully, as if no one cared. How very, very painful that must have been. That pain also extends beyond you. Although you wore the uniform, we know the whole family serves. I'd like to take a moment to recognize your families and friends for their strength, their resilience, and their dedication. When you were deployed, they waited, wondered, and most of all, worried. That separation was so very hard. They lived with thoughts that you may not come home safely, that you might come back hurt, or worse yet, that you wouldn't come home at all. Those thoughts haunted them. Would all of the family members in the room please stand and be recognized? Please stand. For every son, daughter, wife, husband, brother, sister, cousin, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, we honor you, we thank you, we salute you. Today we're here with a grateful community 57 years after the official start of the war, to give you a long overdue and joyous welcome home. In 2015, as we've learned this morning, Senator John Astle sponsored a bill that Governor Larry Hogan signed into law as his first bill, making March 30th Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans Day here in Maryland. It is the one day of the year in Maryland designated to honor each of you. Year after year, Gilchrist pours hundreds of staff and volunteer hours and raises tens of thousands of dollars to host what we hope is the very best and grandest celebration in the state to welcome you home. So on this day, we are here to celebrate you and thank you for your service. We're here to learn about your lives and meet your family. We're here to listen to what you want to share about your experiences in Vietnam. We're here to honor what you're most proud of and to celebrate your accomplishments. We're here to bear witness to your anguish, your hardships, and your suffering. We're here to support you as you grieve your comrades who never returned home. We are also here to rejoice and be with you. We hope your hearts are open today and ready to receive the outpouring of love, honor, and gratitude for you and your service. We hope you can feel how much we care. We're honored and privileged to have a chance to spend time with you today. As we greet all returning troops, together we rejoice and exclaim, "Welcome home. Welcome home. We care about you. We appreciate you. We love you. Welcome home." On behalf of the entire Gilchrist family, welcome home.
Governor Hogan, we had invited him to come, but his schedule didn't permit it, so he did a little film clip, and we're going to present that now. So our media guys are going to.
There can't possibly be words adequate enough to express our gratitude, our respect, and our appreciation to all of you who served, including the over 130,000 Marylanders who bravely served during the Vietnam War. All of you have given more than any of us can ever fully know. And that's why the very first piece of legislation that I enacted as governor was to establish March 30th as Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans Day. So on behalf of all the people of a proud and grateful state, we sincerely thank you for your service. And I pledge to you that as long as I'm governor, I will continue to stand up and fight for each and every one of you and for everyone who has worn the flag of our nation on their arm. May God bless you and your families, and may God continue to bless the state of Maryland and the United States of America.
Thank you, Governor Hogan. I was, we were really happy that he was able to sign that bill, and he did it on a special day. I wanted it to be March 31st, it was my birthday, but they said, no, that's not going to work. And I just got a message from the floor, but I'm not sure what it meant.
Bottom of page 8.
We've already done page 8, haven't we? Oh. Huh?
Good afternoon, I'm Bill Puckett. This is a call to action for all you in the room. First, thank you, Colonel Astle. I've had the honor and privilege of participating in We Honor Veterans program at Gilchrist since 2017. Our committed team of veteran volunteers and volunteer family members work hard to support those who have served as these veterans age and approach end of life. We have honored, celebrated, and thanked thousands of veterans and their families through tributes in their homes, nursing facilities, and residential care communities. Also, we strive to make Veterans Day even more special as we remember and honor veterans and their families. An annual highlight has become the Welcome Home event for our Vietnam veterans and their families, attended by hundreds of veterans each year. Many Vietnam veterans return home never being welcomed or feeling a warm embrace from a fellow American. We have become family to many veterans who previously had no one. We have heard stories from World War II, Korean, and Vietnam warriors who have never been told before. We have developed deep and lasting friendship with our fellow veterans, as we know there is no bond quite like the one that we have with each other. We also help our fellow veterans to die with dignity and at peace. I found it quite rewarding to give something back in this special way. Across our country, for every volunteer committed to serving veterans in palliative and hospice care, there are thousands of veterans who are sick, scared, and alone and have never been honored. They have never been thanked. They have never been welcomed home. Many of them feel as if no one really cares. They have served their country with honor, and now they need their country to serve them. To my fellow veterans, join us in the most rewarding endeavor and get involved. Sign up to serve again. If you live in Baltimore or the surrounding counties, please join me on Gilchrist Honor Veterans Team and help us to honor, thank, and remember the thousands of veterans and their families that we care for each year. To get started, go to gilchristcares.org. If you live in other areas, you may reach out to your local hospice organization, community veterans centers, or Veterans Administration and let them know you want to help. There are so many ways that you can give back and make a difference in the life of another veteran. It's impossible to adequately thank our veterans for their service, but I will close with a big thank you for serving. And welcome home, and I salute you.
Sorry for the little glitch, Mr. Palkett. I appreciate you being here. But in every event, there's always those little glitches. And in the military, we adapt, overcome, and move on. So we appreciate your words, and we're glad that you were here. Now, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Commander Porter A. Halliburton. He was a naval flight officer, flew 75 combat missions before he was shot down in 1965 and captured deep within North Vietnam. He was held in captivity for 7.5 years, where he endured years of torture, starvation, solitary confinement. His life changed when he shared a cell with Major Fred Cherry, the first and highest-ranking African-American pilot who was shot down and imprisoned at the infamous Hanoi Hilton. Their remarkable friendship and story is told in a book called Two Souls Indivisible, The Friendship That Saved Two POWs in Vietnam by James Hirsch. So Commander Halliburton will talk about the most important lessons he learned in Vietnam, the power of forgiveness, the importance of attitude, his remarkable friendship with Fred Cherry that changed his life forever. So with that, Commander Halliburton.
I am honored today to have the opportunity to speak to you, veterans and survivors of a long and difficult war in Vietnam. A war that has altered the fabric of our society as well as the lives of those who fought it. That's why the wonderful work that Gilchrist is doing to help our veterans repair their lives is so important, for many are still suffering. After every war, the historians began to record what happened and why it happened. The strategists, think tanks, and war colleges look at what went right and what went wrong and what lessons can be learned. The survivors try to make sense of their suffering and sacrifice. It is said that our worst experiences can be our greatest teachers, but we must set aside bitterness, remorse, hatred, and all the things that prevent us from looking at our experiences from a different perspective in order to understand them. The curriculum at the Naval War College, where I taught for 28 years, was developed as a direct result of the Vietnam War and the need to teach lessons learned to future leaders, military and civilian. My own experience in Vietnam was to fly 75 combat missions in an F-4B fighter from the aircraft carrier Independence, and then to be shot down and captured on my 75th. In the aftermath of my long captivity, suffering, difficult times in North Vietnamese prisons, I've thought a lot about how we were able to survive. Not only to survive, but to survive with honor. I tried to always stay active, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And I think this was a very important aspect of my survival. Along with the other POWs, I made it my mission to deny the Vietnamese the control over my life that they tried to establish through propaganda, indoctrination, intimidation, fear, deprivation, threats, isolation, pain, and lies. When all of these tactics generally failed, the Vietnamese eventually resorted to extreme violence and torture. In facing that torture, most of us found ways to continue to resist by adopting a second line of resistance. When the first had failed and endurance had found its limits, when that limit was reached and you had to say or do something, the second line reminded you that there were usually other ways to render their tactics useless. One advantage we had, and a weapon that we used, was our captors' poor understanding of American culture, humor, sign language, and the very fabric of our society. All of the interrogators spoke English, and some spoke it well, but none of them spoke American. We could and did use this ignorance against them in our second line of resistance. We were physically completely under our captors' control, and there were no constraints to their treatment of us. They denied that any international laws or organizations had jurisdiction, neither the Geneva Conventions or the International Red Cross. However, the weapons and defenses that we had were powerful in spite of this. We were fortunate that we had capable leaders at every level of command. However, leaders of any rank or authority must have communication with those they lead. And without it, leadership and command do not mean much. Our covert network of communication was our salvation. No matter how difficult they were or how many times they were disrupted, they always survived. If we became professional at anything, it was communication. We also vowed never to let a brother fall outside the net, never let one fall through the crack, never say the situation is just too hard. My own adaptation to life in prison occurred in 3 phases. They merged from one to the next without my realizing it had happened, until I looked back and I saw how my attitude and perspective had changed over my 7+ years of captivity. In the beginning, most of us were quite optimistic and naive about how long the war would last, and we were much less optimistic about how long we could survive. During this time, my thoughts were primarily about the past, and I tried to recall every detail of my life. I wanted to recapture the joy and happiness of the experiences that I had had and the people that I had known. Living in my past was a way to escape from the grim reality of the present. But along with all of the good memories came the realization that I had wasted a great deal of time and missed many opportunities. From the anguish that I felt about the faults and errors of my youth came a determination that my future would be different. My thoughts turned from the past to the future and how to make amends. As the past had been my escape from the painful and uncertain present, this phase of living in the future was also a way to escape it. The second phase of my adaptation was certainly more positive, more productive, more hopeful, because I had realized that I had survived for longer time than I thought I could, and I had endured more than I thought I could. Living in this imaginary future was much more pleasant than living in a very real and difficult present. The transition from this phase led to the final one probably began when I moved from solitary confinement into a cell with 8 other guys. Together, the 9 of us had the resources to deal with the present, to think about and plan for activities, to consider how we could improve our lives by teaching each other what we knew, and to grow to love and respect each other. This phase was about living in the present, for the present now had a meaning. Although we were separated after about a year, I never lost the feeling that we are all in this together, so let's make the most of it while we are here. Throughout most of my imprisonment, I thought that freedom held the key to my happiness. I grasped at every straw of hope that release might be imminent. My spirits would rise with each straw. When nothing happened, my spirits would plummet into depression. That resulted in a sort of a sine wave of elation and depression. And this roller coaster of emotions was very difficult. My remedy for this was to adopt what I called long-term, nonspecific optimism. From that point on, I stopped worrying about things I could not control and concentrated on the things that I could. As a result, I felt that I could survive and lead a meaningful life even in this prison. I was prepared to spend many more years, even the rest of my life, in prison if necessary, and still feel that my life was not a waste. Such is the power of human adaptation and the urge to find meaning in one's life. After I came home, I read a very powerful book, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Frankl had survived Auschwitz, the Nazi concentration camp, and had witnessed misery and death beyond anything we had known in Vietnam. As a psychoanalyst, he felt that a person could find meaning in life even in the worst of circumstances. He believed that man's most basic need is to discover this meaning, and one of the most powerful ways of doing it is through suffering. He stressed that it's not so important what happens to you or what you have or do not have. Those things you cannot control. But it is important how you react to your circumstances, the choices you make, and the attitude you have about life. Controlling one's attitude is the most difficult thing, but it is the most important. When I thought about all of this and tried to make sense of it, I came to realize that our lives as POWs were determined more by the choices that we made than by the circumstances of our captivity. I also came to realize that this was true for human life in any circumstance. Our free will and the freedom to choose our reaction to any condition was something that could not be taken away from us except by despair, insanity, or death. I learned this first great lesson at the very beginning of my POW experience, but I did not fully realize this until much later. What Frankl said resonated with me and helped me to understand how, perhaps innately, I had responded to my circumstances as a prisoner. This is what continues to guide me to this very day, every day. I often need help from others in making the best decisions, especially from Marty, my best friend, companion, and guide. But in the end, each choice is mine. The most important choice I had to make was at the very beginning when I was moved from one bad place to a worse one because I refused to answer the interrogator's questions. One worse place, and then another, and another, until I was in a place that was so bad I felt I could not survive for long. When the time came to make a choice, a better place if you cooperate, a worse one if you don't, it was the hardest choice I have ever faced. I chose the worst one, thinking I would probably never see my family again. but I could not give in to the promise of better treatment. In the middle of the night, I was moved from my filthy and isolated shed to another cell block in the prison. I was shoved into a cell with a severely injured black man and told I had to care for him. In their eyes, to force a young Southern white boy to be servant to a black would be the ultimate humiliation for us both. Instead of the worst place, it was the best. Caring for Major Fred Cherry, U.S. Air Force, gave me something important to do beyond my own survival. Fred says that I saved his life, but he also saved mine in the way this changed my attitude towards captivity. We were in this together. We became brothers and the best of friends, friends for life. The details of our time together are recorded in the book Two Souls Indivisible by James Hirsch. When we were separated after 8 months, it was the saddest day of my life. It was also the beginning of the time of brutal torture to get what interrogators had failed to get by other means. The one choice that brought Fred and me together was perhaps the most important in my life. I learned a second great lesson from my experience, but it did not come until the very end. During the last few hours of my captivity, I came to realize that although hatred had been a useful part of my armor that protected me from the influence of my captors, it was no longer needed. When I walked through the gates of the Hanoi Hilton on February the 12th, 1973, as we were leaving the prison that had symbolized all the misery and hatred that we had endured over so many years, I turned to face that compound and I said, "I forgive you." I did that because I knew that I could not and should not carry that hatred home with me, back to my family, back to my life of freedom. Hatred is a poison to the soul, mind, and body, a prison of the worst kind, and I have been free from it from that day. When I walked through those gates and said those words, I was freed from 2 prisons. This was the most liberating act of my life, and I chose to do it. One must choose to forgive, and the power to choose is at the very foundation of real freedom. As hatred was a prison of the mind, there are many such other prisons: guilt, shame, fear, victimhood, bitterness, despair. We all have the keys to those prisons in the pockets of our minds. We must choose to take them out and use them to unlock the doors and walk away. I wrote poetry in prison, and I would like to close with this poem that I wrote in Hanoi in 1970. Its title is also the title of a book about my time in Vietnam that I have just finished. It will be published in the fall. Reflections on captivity. How can I measure the loss of my dimensions as I lie spread across this crass expanse of time? Bitter years, devoid of latitude or luster, my duty days of trial and decision, are but pages turned, but pages not forgotten. Those countless hours of aimless retrospection, regret, restraint, and introspection, the strange monotony of unrewarded hopes, unconquered hopes, amidst my unborn tears, have tempered the metal of my structure and filled the empty spaces of my soul. Thank you.
I don't know if Commander Halliburton can hear me, but I just want to say thank you for that. It was, those remarks were really pretty stirring. And I think for all of us that served in Vietnam, we were there for a year, maybe if you did one term, or two if you did 2 terms or tours. But those guys in the prisons, they served a lot. So, and it's important that we remember them as well. And so on a lighter side, I had a little anecdotal thought that popped into my head while I was sitting here. In the Senate, I had a colleague that knew that I was a Vietnam veteran, that I'd been in country from June of '68 to July '69. He said, well, I was in the Army same time you were in the Marine Corps. And I said, oh, really, where'd you serve? The Italian Riviera. So I guess he's what they call a Vietnam-era veteran. And I don't know, the travel arrangements for my team were a little different. Last year, well, on August 18th in 2021, our country lost another great patriot, beloved war correspondent, best-selling author, and a dear friend of veterans with the death of Joe Galloway. He was 79 years old. Last year, Gilchrist had the privilege of conducting one of the last interviews with Joe Galloway for Gilchrist 2021 Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans Day celebration video. Joe served 4 tours as a war correspondent in Vietnam, which included the early days covering the first major engagement in November of 1965, the Battle of the Ia Drang. Along with his notebook and camera, he carried an M16 rifle and was embedded with the outnumbered 1st Cavalry Regiment that fought a 4-day battle against 3 North Vietnamese Army regiments. During the battle, he carried a badly wounded man to safety and was the only American civilian to receive the Bronze Star with a Combat V during the Vietnam War for his heroism. With Lieutenant General Hal Moore, they wrote a detailed account of the battle in a best-selling 1992 book, We Were Soldiers Once and Young. And of course, there was a movie that was made of that. And I always remember the one scene where he says, well, I'm a non-combatant, and the sergeant major said, son, there ain't no non-combatants here today. Then they did another book later called Journey Back to the Battlefield, and it talks about what they'd done during the battle and then what their lives had achieved after they came back home and got out of the service. Joe once stated, you got to do what's right, and I can't say it any better than Hal Moore, who said, hate war, but love the warrior. We sent them there. We owe them all the support, all that we promised. So in 2013, Joe Galloway was sworn into service as a special consultant to the Department of Defense's Vietnam War 50th anniversary commemoration project, and to join the country's efforts to thank, honor, and help the healing of those veterans and their families. After the Battle of the Ia Drang, Joe said, for a brief time, I stopped being a reporter and became a soldier. In the process, I found and made the best, most loyal friends of a lifetime. One of his best and most loyal friends was Lieutenant Colonel George Forrest, who commanded Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 5th Cavalry Regiment during the battle. And he accompanied Joe and General Hal back to the battlefield of the Ia Drang in 1993. And many of you know that Colonel Forrest was our host for the first 2 Welcome Home Vietnam celebrations. And he was unable to be here for this one. The plan was that he was, but he had some health issues, and he called me and said, hey, you can do it. So here I am today. And I have to tell you, I became really close friends with George Forrest. He lived in Annapolis, and we were at a cocktail party one day in somebody's backyard, and my wife calls me over and said, there's this guy, he's telling Marine jokes, you got to get over there. So, well, why do I want to go listen to Marine jokes? He said, well, this is a good guy, so I went over. Now, I had read the book We Were Soldiers Once, and I knew that George Forrest was born and raised in Maryland, graduate of Morgan State University, and was back in Maryland. And I always wanted to see him, so I walked over, and he looked like Mr. Clean. He's about this tall, and he has shaved his head. And he stuck out his hand, which is about this big, and said, "Hi, George Forrest here." George Forrest, wow. So anyway, we became friends, and I got involved with some guys where we have coffee every morning down to City Dock, and it's mostly, as you can imagine, Annapolis is a Navy town and a Marine town too. Most of the people that sit in this coffee are former naval officers. So one day I called George. I said, "George, we don't have any jointness, and we really need you to join our group, because then we'll have jointness." And so George showed up, and he stands next to the table, and he says, "Well, John, you got your jointness, but I think you got a little diversity too." But later, George's wife told me how important it was to him as he tried to recover from his Vietnam experiences to be able to go to this coffee group and talk to people that understood. And so that's part of what we're about here, and I think that's why this Welcome Home is so important. So anyway, George, as a good friend of Joe Galloway, did a tribute, and we're going to play that now.
A hearty welcome home. Before I begin, I would like to thank Senator John Astle, a good friend of mine, who, for his leadership in sponsoring legislation that made Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans Day a day of celebration for us. And I would also like to thank Gilchrist for what they do on a daily basis for Vietnam veterans and their families, and for sponsoring and putting on this event today. I'm humbled and honored to have been asked to say a few words about a giant who was a friend of mine, and many of you know Joe Galloway. When I was searching for words to describe this man, some came to mind, but I don't think I have the eloquency of finding the right words. But there are some words that I could use, like father, journalist, friend, soldier. And oh, by the way, Joe Galloway is the only civilian to receive the Bronze Star with V for valor in Vietnam. But the word that comes to mind more often than any other is storyteller. In his best-selling novel, We Were Soldiers Once and Young, he depicts the battle of the first major conflict between regular NVA soldiers and the 1st Air Cavalry Division. Unlike most books that are written about battles, this was not only a war story, but this was a love story about sacrifice, bravery, courage, and what men do for each other in times of crisis. This was especially necessary for the Vietnam era veteran because the nation perceived us as depicted in such Vietnam movies as Apocalypse Now, Platoon. These depicted pot-smoking, baby-killing guys. We weren't that. We were young men and women who believed that we were doing what our country needed us to do. Joe's mentorship for me gave me the strength to face some of the demons that had haunted me for years. As a commander, you feel responsible for the safety and the lives of your men. I thought for years that I failed in that mission. Joe's words of encouragement allowed me to be able to talk about the heroes that I lost in this one battle. I lost 17 souls. Who knows what these young people could have been? They came from all corners of the country, from all different occupations, but their purpose was the same: to protect each other and to survive. And as a commander, when you don't bring them all home, you wrestle with that. Thanks to Joe Galloway, I'm now able to proudly talk about my experiences and the experiences of my soldiers. They, in many ways, were my sons. A couple of weeks ago, or a few months ago, I attended a memorial service for Joe Galloway. The road to the church was lined with American flags. There were guys on Harley Davidsons that led a procession up to the church. Joe's ashes sat at the front of the church, decked out in his Stetson hat, his first calf Stetson hat, which he was always part of his uniform. Bagpipes were played, Amazing Grace was sang, tears were shed by everyone. And the ceremony was the fitting way for a soldier to go home. Joe, you will always be in my heart. Your words are indelibly etched in my mind when you said, "We may not have been the great generation, but we were the greatest of our generation." My good brother, I salute you, I love you, and I'll miss you.
And for that, we thank George Forrest, and we're really sorry that he couldn't be here. I think he'd have done this better than I, but that's just, yeah. Anyway, last year was Gilchrist Welcome Home Vietnam Veteran Day celebration, and they did an interview with Joe Galloway. We deeply miss you, Joe, and so we would like to play the video for you so that you can hear his last words. So with that, the Joe Galloway video.
There are a certain number of folks who came home from Vietnam with a bad case of survivor's guilt. There's no reason for any Vietnam veteran who survived to feel guilty about surviving. This is a waste of God's good time and your life. Don't do that. First thing you have to do is forgive yourself. That's the real answer. And until you do that, you're caught in a cycle of misery. And we don't want that for our veterans. They don't deserve that. We need to pull them out of that, to teach them that the only thing they need to have is pride. Pride in the job they did, in the friends they made, in the friends they lost. Took a lot of pictures. George Forrest is one of my heroes, and he was the hardest nut to crack when I was doing interviews for the book. He wouldn't return my phone calls. I finally got him on the phone, and he said, "Look, I don't want to talk about this. I've put it in a box up in the top of the closet, and I don't want to ever open that box because I'm afraid of what it'll do to me." He said, I have a feeling of great guilt. And I said, whatever for, George? And he said, I lost 17 of my precious men out of one company. I said, George, I said, I know this battle now better than most folks who fought it. And I would tell you that you did a better job than any other company commander in that battle. I said, there are other commanders who lost 80 men. You lost 17. That's the fewest number of casualties of any company in this battle. I said, you should be proud, not guilty. When I finished the chapter which he was in, I sent it to him. And he called me up a few days later. He said, I want to thank you. He said, I want to thank you for giving me my life back. But mostly I want to thank you because I went home this weekend and I gave that chapter to my father. And he read it, and he sat there for a few minutes, silent. And finally he looked up and said, you done good, George. He said, I wouldn't trade $1 million for that. If you are a participant and a witness in something as horrendous as that battle, it never leaves you. You're meant to remember all of it and to honor those who fell and didn't get to come home. We made a trip back over there, myself, General Moore, a dozen American veterans of this battle. 5 of us got to spend the night on the battlefield. Hal Moore had been wanting this for 35, 40 years so that he could walk the foxholes and commune with his fallen troops. And we stood there, and a monsoon rain came pouring in to keep the helicopter from coming back to get us. And we stood there in the rain for an hour or so, and then we built a fire. After the sky cleared for an hour, there was a shower of meteors like I've never seen before. It was God's own tracers over our heads. And I think every one of us had the same thought. These are the spirits of every man on both sides who died in this place. And they're telling us, it's okay. You've done all you can do to memorialize us. Let it go. And you know what I found was their spirits didn't weigh much. I had them on my shoulder. I carry them still. At night in Vietnam, we formed a perimeter, dug our foxholes in a circle, and the safest place was inside that perimeter. And today, the perimeter is the reunions of combat veterans, wherever. Some of them are division reunions or battalion reunions, or a gathering like this one in Maryland. It's safe in that perimeter too. It's the one place you can find people who will listen to you, people that you can talk to. And I recommend you come and wear your ears, wear your tongue. Be prepared to talk, be prepared to listen, be prepared to heal. And God bless you.
And for that, we thank Joe Galloway for everything that he's done. So we're also delighted to have with us this evening Donovan Chapman, a veteran of the Afghanistan War and an American country music artist. He's charted 4 singles on the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart. He served with Matt Payne in the U.S. Air Force with the elite pararescue team, the most highly trained special operations, combat search and rescue operators in all the environments. He comes from a long family line of family members who served our country. His great-grandfather served in World War I. His grandfather served in World War II. His father served in Vietnam. And during his service, he suffered a spinal injury and traumatic brain injuries, I would assume, when a parachute didn't function well. That's my thought here. And he was told that he would never sing again. Well, he's going to perform a song that he wrote for Matt and this event, "The Dad I Never Knew." And I just want to, before you start that, to say that it's a demonstration of what you can do if you steel yourself to overcome the adversity that you're faced with. And it's an example to all of us. Thanks.
Check 1, 2. You guys get the guitar on over there? Everybody hear the guitar out there? Oh. So I'm half deaf too. But thank you all for having me. I just want to say this is a wonderful event. Like my father, he still suffers with PTSD pretty traumatically, and he was with the 7th Air Cavalry in Vietnam at the Tet. And I work with freedomsingsusa.org. Is another partnered nonprofit, and we write with veterans all across the country. I lead the Special Operations Veterans class, and I have help from other writers like Mr. Don Goodman, who's a co-founder, who's written many, many #1 hits for people in country music, and he runs a national class. And we've been writing with veterans and singing their songs and giving them an element of therapy and support that is being 100% effective in the healing process of breaking the victim mentality for whatever it may be, or the guilt, or the process that happens as the breakdown of PTSD grabs hold. And we give them a road map out on the song. I've been able to write with Miss Jackie and Red Cunningham, parents of my first troop who was killed in Afghanistan, Operation Anaconda. And he was also killed there with John Chapman, who was awarded the Medal of Honor, and Jason received the Air Force Cross. So it's a great thing to be able to do these songs. And as I've gotten to know Matt over the years, he's become my manager, and couldn't have a better family of his family to be behind me, because trust is something that is very shy in the music business. It's not like we had in the military. And so Matt was telling me about this event and said, "Would you like to do it?" And I said, "Absolutely, I'd like to do it." And he said, "Well, could we write a song about my dad?" And I said, "Yep, if it's going to be for your healing, I absolutely will." Because I know Matt has to go through this door himself. And it's something we all do, and I hope this song touches you guys' heart. Dad was sent to war in '66. An airborne ranger from an old farm hick. In a sandbag bunker one jungle night, talking about his kids back home with his wife. When the next morning came around, he was killed by a landmine underground. There was one child he didn't see, and my mama's one, that child was me. I could feel you walking by me every day, saying words I'll never hear you say. I pray someday my dreams will all come true, and I'll meet the dad I never knew. I raised 3 kids that are my life. They gave me strength through my hard times. Well, that's where the rubber met the road. shift work on patrol to keep the cash flow. Dad, I wonder if God lets you see all I've done in my life in your memory. It's a dedication all to you. Vietnam didn't kill the heart of you. I can feel you walking by me every day, saying words I'll never hear you say. Pray someday my dreams will all come true, and I'll meet the dad I never knew. Is the man I am who I'm supposed to be? Though someone different had to raise me, but nature has a way of showing the truth. 'Cause when I look in the mirror, all I see is you. I can feel you walking by me every day, saying words I'll never hear you say. I pray someday my dreams will all come true, and I'll meet the dad I never knew. I pray someday my dreams will all come true, and I'll meet the dad I never knew. In memory of Chuck Kane Womack.
So Donovan, we thank you for that beautiful piece of music that you put together, for your service, and for all that you're doing to help your fellow veterans. And I think one of the things that I thought as I was listening to that is, while each of us suffers through the pains of our own experiences, it's important to know that those pains also radiate out into other places where you might not think. And here's a good example. So at this celebration, we'll also... What's this? Oh, I missed a page, and this is important. When Commander Halliburton talked about his cellmate, Lieutenant Colonel Cherry, we have today with us Lieutenant Colonel Cherry's family, his son, and his wife, and so we'd like to have you guys stand to be recognized for the... Thanks, man. Well, at this part of the program, we'll be conducting 3 salutes. The first salute is in solemn recognition of every veteran that's in this room. And the second salute is a tribute to those veterans who are no longer with us. And I invite each of you during the second to say together the names of your friends and any deceased veteran that you may have known. For a person dies twice, once when they take their final breath, and later when their name is spoken for the last time. But may we continue to speak their names so they don't see that second one. And the third salute is the missing man's table that you see over here. It's a special table reserved to honor the prisoners of war and those Vietnam veterans that are missing in action and who will never return. So let me explain the meaning of this table. Set for one, the empty chair represents Americans who were, are, missing for each of the 4 services: Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard. And the civilians that were missing as well were all with us in spirit. The table's round, and that's to show everlasting concern. Underneath that blue is a cloth, a white tablecloth, which symbolizes the purity of their motives when answering the call for service. The single red rose reminds us of the lives of these Americans and their loved ones and friends who keep the faith while seeking answers. The yellow ribbon symbolizes our continued uncertainty, hope for their return, and determination to account for them. A slice of lemon reminds us of the bitter taste that captured and missing in a foreign land. A pinch of salt symbolizes the tears of our missing and their families who long for the answers after decades of uncertainty. The lighted candle reflects our hope for their return, alive or dead. A spiritual book representing the strength gained through faith for many of us to sustain us for those lost from our country, founded as one nation under God. The glass is inverted to symbolize their inability to share a toast, and the chair is empty because they're still missing. So with a moment of silence while we ponder that. And now I'd like to call on Sergeant Major Andre Welch, who will lead his soldiers and other active duty military from Fort Meade, Marines from 8th and I, Airmen from Joint Base Bowling, ROTC cadets from Loyola and Towson universities, and the young Marines with these free salutes. And for these salutes, I invite all Vietnam veterans who are able to salute. So Command Sergeant Major Welch, it's yours.
Mark. Group. Hold. Six turn. Hey.
The first salute is for the Vietnam veterans who are with us here today. Second salute is to the Vietnam veterans who are no longer with us. And during this second salute, please join me as we all say together, either out loud or to ourselves, the names of veterans who have died.
Victor, hey. Present arms. Order arms.
Lieutenant Commander Woods, Staff Sergeant James Galloway, Pararescue Man, Bitzenbarger, Lieutenant Donald Ford, Lieutenant Chuck Payne, Lieutenant Tony Fox, Lieutenant
And the third salute is to the missing man table to honor and remember the POWs and those Vietnam veterans who never returned home.
Present
Ready? Face. Forward. March.
Thank you. Commend Sergeant Major Welch. And since I have the microphone, I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege. You may be seated, please. I took part in the final evacuation of Saigon. And I want to tell you that the last two casualties of the Vietnam War were two pilots. Two guys who were friends of mine, guys that I'd served with. Captain Bill Neistel and First Lieutenant Mike Shea. They were coming back to the ship. They'd been up for 18 hours. They'd been flying. They'd been back to the ship to refuel, of course, because you only had 2 hours. But they were coming back. It was really late or early in the morning, and they crashed into the sea as they were turning final to the boat. The crew was recovered, but the two pilots were never recovered, and their bodies are still at the bottom of the South China Sea. So with that, Wayne will be singing our final God Bless America, God Bless the USA. Thank you.
My dreams were gone. I worked for all my life, and I had to start again with my 2 daughters and my wife. Thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and you can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the ones who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining seas, from Detroit down to Houston and New York to LA, where there's pride in every American heart. And it's time we stand and say that I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the ones who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And and I won't forget the ones who died, who gave that right to me, and I'd gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA.
Thank you, Wayne, and thank you, Marines. We're proud to be Americans today, and I know I can speak on behalf of everyone here that we would gladly stand up next to you and defend our country still today. And I say, God bless America. There's a saying that is engraved on brass plaques, and you may have one in your house. I know there's one in my house. It's been there for a long time. And it goes like this: war is an ugly thing, but not the ugliest of things. The decayed and degraded state of moral and patriotic feeling, which thinks that nothing is worth war, is much worse. A man or woman who has nothing for which they are willing to fight, nothing they care more about than their own safety, are miserable creatures who have no chance of being free unless made and kept so by the exertion of better people than themselves. And my brothers and sisters, we are those better people. So, finally, I'd like to thank Gilchrist for hosting this event. Their commitment to Vietnam veterans and all veterans is evident in each day by the compassion, the care and respect that they show those who served the country and our communities. I'd like to thank two people, particularly Kim McDowell, who is a coordinator of the We Honor Veterans program here. And that's okay, you're going to see her. And Diane Sansilio, we'd like to have you two to the stage, please. No need to run, Kim. We'll wait for you. Thank you all. Do you want to say something?
I would like to say something. Without these two people, this event would never happen. And as Senator Astle has said on many occasions, part of the reason that he introduced the bill was because Diane Sansilio
wouldn't let me alone.
Wouldn't leave him alone until he did. And so we are grateful to both of you. This doesn't happen by wishing and hoping. It happens by great work by great leaders, and so thank you. I would also like the task force. Would you please stand and be recognized? Again, without these great leaders, this event would not happen. So, and finally, would all of the staff of Gilchrist that are here today to help make this event possible, would you also please stand and be recognized and accept our appreciation? Thank you very much.
Thank you all for being here today. And I want to say one thing before we close. When I look back over my life and think about all the things that I've accomplished over the years, the one thing about which I'm most proud is my service in Vietnam. And I think you all feel the same, I'm sure. So we look forward to seeing you again next March of 2023. Again, it's not the 31st, which is my birthday, but the 30th, and we'll be celebrating 50 years since the last troop left Vietnam and came home. So thank you for being here today. Please travel safely as you travel back to your homes and communities. And may God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.